Chapter 16 The House of Special Purpose, May to June 1918. Left behind. With Nicholas and Alexandra gone, sadness descended on the house, said valet Alexei Volkyov. The children waited nervously for news of their parents. What was happening to them? Even Anastasia turned solemn and fretful. "These days I am boring and not pretty," she admitted. Finally, on May 3rd, a week after the family's separation, Commissar Yakovlev cabled with news. The group was in Yekaterinburg, a city located in the Ural Mountains. The news stunned those in Tobolsk. "Why Yekaterinburg?" wrote one household member. "We always thought that Moscow was their destination." Moscow had been their destination, but while Yakovlev and his baggage were en route, Bolshevik officials suddenly changed their minds. They ordered Nicholas and his family to the Urals. No one knows exactly why. Certainly leaders in Yekaterinburg, a town with fierce anti-Tsarist sentiments, had pressured the government to hand over the Romanovs to them. They claimed their remote location 800 miles east of Moscow could keep the family safe. But Moscow also knew that Yekaterinburg's Soviet was, according to one official report made in 1918, undisciplined and violent. Many of its town leaders eagerly spoke of finishing off the butcher, Nicholas II. So brutal was their reputation that Commissar Yakovlev grew worried about delivering the family there. Aware that Lenin was considering putting Nicholas on trial for crimes against the Russian people, Yakovlev cabled Moscow as soon as he received the new orders. "I consider it my duty to warn you," he began. "If the family was left in Yekaterinburg, not only would Moscow never be able to get them back, but the Romanovs will be in utter danger at all times." His warning did not change Moscow's mind. Days later, a letter written by Marie but dictated by Alexandra finally arrived in Tobolsk. "It is not clear how things will be here," read the letter. Unable to give many details about their new surroundings, because all ingoing and outgoing mail was read by the Yekaterinburg guards first, the Empress did warn that all their belongings had been searched, even their medicines. Medicines was the Romanovs' code word for jewels. Before she left, Alexandra had instructed the girls to conceal the family's jewelry if they ever received this message. Now they took up the needle and thread and cleverly sewed close to 14 million worth of diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and pearls into the hems of skirts and the belts of dresses, behind jacket buttons and under hat rims, and deep inside pillows and cushions. Most of the medicines were concealed between double layers of cotton in the girls' camisoles, almost 19 pounds of diamonds alone in each of these undergarments. The jewels were all the family had left of their vast fortune, their financial future if they escaped Russia. While they sewed, another letter arrived, this one from Marie. "We get nasty surprises here every day," she wrote ominously. "Who would think we would be treated like this? We hope you have it better." The children didn't. In mid-May, the Bolshevik government had sent another commissar to Tobolsk, Nicholas Rodionov, described by one courtier as a right snake of a man. Rodionov hated the imperial family and enjoyed inflicting petty humiliations on the Grand Duchesses. Armed from head to toe with revolvers, rifles, and knives, the new commissar stalked about the house, keeping careful watch over his prisoners. His orders were to bring the rest of the family to Yekaterinburg as soon as Alexei could travel. In the meantime, the governor's mansion would become a strict prison, he announced. On his first day, he ordered the doors inside the house to remain open at all times, even the one leading to the Grand Duchess's bedroom. "Prisoners," he declared, "must always be watched." When valet Volkyov protested, "Your soldiers would pass by there all the time," Rodionov pulled out his revolver and pointed it at the servant. "If you do not do as I have ordered, I will shoot you where you stand," he warned. From then on, the girls had little privacy. Rodionov also instituted a daily roll call. Every morning the prisoners were made to line up in the ballroom, facing the commissar. "Are you Olga Nikolaevna? Tatiana Nikolaevna?" he shouted into their faces. Stepping forward, they obediently answered his questions. "Darling," Olga wrote in one of her last letters she sent to Anna Vrubova, "you must know how dreadful it all is." These changes, so obviously and frighteningly a taste of what was to come in Yekaterinburg, forced Gibbs and Gilliard to question whether or not the children should be sent to their parents. "We feel we ought to delay their departure as long as possible," Gilliard wrote in his diary. The girls refused to hear of it. In the 3 weeks since their parents' departure, Alexei, though still unable to walk, had grown strong enough to travel. All four were eager to be reunited with their family. "In our thoughts we are with you all the time," Anastasia wrote to Marie. "It is terribly sad and empty here, and I have whole trainloads of things to tell you all." And so the prisoners began packing. "The rooms are empty," Alexei scrawled in his diary. "Little by little, everything is put away. The walls look bare without their pictures." On their final night in the governor's mansion, as a maid wrapped the last of the knickknacks, Rodionov suddenly appeared at her side. "Life down there in Yekaterinburg," he whispered, "will be very different." Last stop. On May 23rd, after a 3-day journey, the train carrying the imperial children pulled into Yekaterinburg station. Despite an icy drizzle, a large crowd had gathered. "I cannot describe the faces I saw," said one courtier. "Fat faces, lean faces, but all with deadly, intense hatred stamped on them." As the luggage was being taken out, one man grabbed a box and tore it open. Out spilled boots and shoes. "Look! The Tsar has 6 pairs, and I have none," cried the man. In response, the mob began chanting, "Death to the tyrant," and surged forward. A second box full of Alexandra's gowns was ripped open. The sight further enraged the crowd. "The dresses of wanton women," shrieked a woman, pointing toward the train. "Off with their heads!" In response, the mob screamed, "Down with them! Hang them! Drown them in the lake!" From the train window, the children watched as the soldiers worked to hold back the mob. Finally, Rodionov ordered them out of the train. As they gathered up their things and went into the gray Siberian day, their expressions, recalled one eyewitness, were a tragic symphony, nervous, emotional, trying to suppress their pride, but also trying to suppress their fear in front of the hostile strangers. Pierre Gilliard, who had been placed in a separate car for the entire journey, saw them go. Nagorny the sailor passed my window, carrying the sick Alexei in his arms. Behind him came the Grand Duchesses, loaded with valises and small personal belongings. Tatiana Nikolaevna came last, carrying her little dog and struggling to drag a heavy brown valise. It was raining, and I saw her feet sinking into the mud at every step. The girls climbed into a waiting carriage and drove away. Added Gilliard, "How little I suspected that I was never to see them again." The House of Special Purpose. Stretching across a cluster of small hills, Yekaterinburg was a city of iron-smelting factories, soap works, and tanneries. Its wide boulevards were lined with fine houses and golden-domed churches, as well as a natural history museum, 2 theaters, and even an opera house. Near the center of this town, on an unpaved street lined with linden trees, a wealthy engineer named N.N. Ipatiev had built himself an ornate 2-story stone house. But in April, just as Nicholas and Alexandra were being taken from Tobolsk, Ipatiev had received orders from the Bolshevik government to leave. He'd had time to pack just a few belongings before workmen arrived to transform his home into a prison. Hastily, they built a tall wooden fence that not only reached the windows on the upper floors, but entirely hid the house and its garden from the street. Later, this fence would be extended even higher, all the way up to the house's eaves. They sealed off 5 rooms on the upper floor as a prison and whitewashed all the windows so the captives could not see out. "It always looks as if there is a thick fog outside," complained Nicholas. "Only one of these windows could be opened. Without much ventilation, the rooms," said Nicholas, "were very hot and stuffy." When all was ready, the house had received its new and ominous name, the House of Special Purpose. Now the carriages carrying the children rolled into the House of Special Purpose's courtyard. For the last time, they saw the outside world. Then the fence's heavy wooden doors slammed behind them, and they raced through the rain into the house where their parents eagerly waited. In 5 rooms. The children found themselves crammed into 5 interconnecting rooms with their parents and their servants, Dr. Botkin, the maid Anna Demidyova, cook Ivan Karatanov, and his 14-year-old kitchen assistant, Leonid Sednev, and footman Alexei Troop. The Empress had hoped to squeeze in Gibbs and Gilliard too, but officials denied the men permission to enter the house. Instead, they were returned to Tobolsk, along with many of the others who had accompanied the Grand Duchesses. Nicholas and Alexandra occupied the corner bedroom, with its couch and armoire. It was small but cozy, said Marie. This room's only exit was through the girls' cramped bedroom, actually a former dressing room, with its floral wallpaper and oriental rug. Until their army cots arrived from the train station, the girls snuggled together on a mound of coats and blankets on the floor, whispering late into the night. There was little other furniture in their room, a table, a few upright chairs, and a large mirror in one corner. As the weeks passed, the girls had less and less use for this last room. Even though they'd left Tsarskoye Selo with boxes of clothing, they hadn't been allowed to bring most of them into the house of special purpose. Instead, their luggage had been tossed unopened and haphazardly into a storage shed located behind the house. Soon the few clothes they had grew threadbare and faded. Did they find themselves standing before the mirror, longing for the white lace dresses they used to wear? The girls' room was connected to the dining room with its wooden floors and solid oak furniture. At Nicholas's insistence, all of the prisoners, royals and servants alike, sat together for meals at the big table. But there was not enough silverware to go around. This was because their fine tableware also sat unopened in the shed. Other things sat untouched in the shed too. Boxes of Alexi's baby clothes, riding crops, binoculars, and most disappointing to the children, their beloved brownie box cameras. Even in Tobolsk, the family had been allowed to use them, but guards had confiscated the cameras here in Yekaterinburg. There was something else in the shed too. Nicholas's diaries and letters, neatly stacked in crate number 9 marked AF and crate number 13 marked NA. The final space was the drawing room. Here, Alexandra made an altar by covering a table with her lace bedspread and the family's icons. Here, too, the children played the mahogany piano left behind by Comrade Ipiatev, while Nicholas sat reading beneath an ornate chandelier of Italian glass. At night, this room became Dr. Botkin's bedroom, while Trupp, Karatinov, and young Leonid slept in the stairway hall. Anna Demidova was given a closet-sized room toward the back of the house. Also located on the house's top floor, but separate from the prisoners' rooms, was Commandant Alexander Adviv's office. A former factory worker, Adviv was tall and thin-faced, and behind Nicholas's back called him Nicholas the Blood Drinker. He had gotten the job of overseeing the Romanovs' imprisonment because of his dedication to the Bolshevik Party. In the elegant office that had once belonged to Comrade Ipiatev, the commander smoked and drank and scrawled an occasional order on stationery he'd had engraved with the words House of Special Purpose. Between shifts, guards squeezed into the office, flinging their rifles onto the rich carpets before reclining on the sofa's plush cushions. These guards, noted Nicholas sarcastically, are original in both composition and dress. Indeed, the 40 men guarding the imperial family were not professional soldiers or hardened Bolshevik revolutionaries. Most were young factory workers between the ages of 17 and 23, some the same age as the Grand Duchesses. They did not have any fighting experience or know how to handle guns. They had not taken the job out of hatred for the Tsar, but rather for the money, explained a 21-year-old guard named Alexander Strakotin. Young and immature, these guards made all kinds of mistakes, admitted Strakotin, like sleeping at their posts, leaving their posts, and letting people in for a peek at the imperial family. One guard accidentally fired his rifle into a storeroom ceiling directly beneath the Grand Duchess's bedroom, causing the girls to scream with fear. Another dropped a hand grenade into the garden, where it exploded, rattling both windows and nerves. And one day, while Anastasia stood at the prison's one open window, hoping to catch a scrap of breeze, a bullet whizzed past her head and lodged in the wall behind her. Had one of the guards shot at her on purpose? Nicholas refused to believe it. No one would dare fire at the Tsar's daughter, not even in revolutionary Russia, would they? In my opinion, he said with mock bravado, the sentry was just fooling around with his rifle the way guards always do. But was he really? Days later, according to an often repeated but unsubstantiated story, Anastasia asked the commandant's assistant for permission to visit the storage shed. She wanted to fetch a pair of shoes from her luggage. The assistant laughed nastily. "The shoes you have on," he said, "would easily last the rest of your life." A monotony of days. Days passed, each one the same. Rising between 8 and 9 every morning, the family dressed and joined the rest of the prisoners before the makeshift altar. After prayers, led by Alexandra, they headed into the dining room for a breakfast of black bread and tea. This was also the time when Commandant Adviv took roll call, making sure that each prisoner was accounted for. Once in a while the family received a cup of hot chocolate or a slice of cold meat for breakfast, but for the most part they received the same rations as any other Russian citizen. At first, a workplace cafeteria called a canteen delivered the family's meals every day, usually an unvaried menu of soup and pork cutlets. In mid-June, worried about the imperial family's diet, nuns from a nearby convent began bringing eggs, milk, cream, and bread to the house's gates each morning, which the family's cook, Ivan Karatanyov, turned into simple meals. The nuns also brought sausages, vegetables, and the occasional meat pie. These last items never reached the imperial table. Instead, Avdiv and his guards gobbled them up. During the day, the family filled their hours by reading or sewing. They played cards. Anastasia taught the dogs tricks, and all the girls helped Anna Demidyova with the household chores. They swept floors, washed windows, and gathered up the family's dirty laundry so it could be sent out for cleaning. But this last task quickly became a problem. The Grand Duchesses insisted on changing their bed linen every day, recalled Avdiv. In just a few weeks, they racked up a whopping 87-ruble laundry bill, around $428. When Soviet officials saw the bill, they flew into a rage. It was outrageous, absurd, astronomical. From now on, they ordered, the imperial family would have to wash its own bed linens. After all, a little work never hurt anyone. The Grand Duchesses were willing, but they didn't know the first thing about doing laundry. They asked Avdiv for directions, but the commandant knew as little as they did. So he headed to the library in search of a manual, but I could find no written instructions on how to do laundry. Anxious to carry out the Soviets' order, Avdiv finally hired the girls a laundry instructor, bestowing upon him the title Comrade Laundry Teacher to the House of Special Purpose, recalled the commandant. He proved rather clever with his work and got on well with the Grand Duchesses. A few weeks later, the bored Grand Duchesses begged Ivan Karatanyov for bread-baking lessons. With the commandant's permission, they spent an entire morning in the upstairs kitchen, happily mixing and kneading. The results, noted Alexandra in her diary, were excellent. The family's evenings were filled with more reading, more card games, more prayers. The only break in this routine came in the late morning and again in the afternoon. That's when the family was allowed to walk for 30 minutes outside in the small, weed-choked garden. Why so little time outdoors? Nicholas had asked his captors. Summer had finally come to Siberia, hot and sunny. How could they be so cruel as to leave the family trapped indoors all day with the sealed-in smells of cigarette smoke and sweat? It is unbearable to be locked up and not be in a position to go out into the garden and spend a fine evening outside, Nicholas said. Couldn't he and the children clean up the garden or chop wood? Avdiv's assistant denied his request. Why? Persisted Nicholas. So that this resembles a prison regime, replied the assistant. Still, the two youngest Grand Duchesses must have relished this brief chance to feel the sun on their skin. At these times the guards heard them laugh as they chased the dogs through the scraggly flower beds or around the few trees. Alexei, too, must have enjoyed the fresh air. Although the boy could no longer walk, Nicholas hugged him to his broad chest and carried him outside to a waiting wheelchair. Then Leonid Sednev, the 14-year-old kitchen assistant, would push Alexei into the garden. Sometimes the boys played with toy soldiers. Other times Nicholas would bring his son pebbles or flowers to examine. Being a child, recalled one of the guards, Alexei would look at them and then toss them into the bushes. When the family first arrived, all the guards, even those not on duty, had pressed into the garden to get a look at them. Soon, recalled guard Alexander Strakotin, everyone had a chance to see the Grand Duchesses. They quickly became the topic of conversation between the young men, who passed some sleepless nights speaking of them when they were off duty. There is nothing special about them, declared one guard. They are stuck-up and stupid, said another. But Strakotin disagreed. There was something very special about them, he argued. You could look at them in their old and tattered clothes like any poor girls, but yet there was something especially sweet about them. They always looked good to me, and I thought they would not have looked better even if they had been covered in gold and diamonds. Strict rules prohibited prisoners and guards from talking to one another, but Anastasia and Marie didn't care. They were used to speaking with soldiers and felt a natural ease in their company, and so they drew the young men into light-hearted conversations. Flirtatious and giggling, the little pair would stroll across the garden, their spaniel Jemmy scampering along at their feet. Approaching a guard on duty, Anastasia would pretend to yawn. "We are so bored," she would say. "In Tobolsk, there was always something to do. I know. Try to guess the name of this dog. How could the guards resist? Some joined eagerly in the banter, answering the girls' questions about their lives and hobbies. Others, with smiles and winks, said, "Don't try to distract me with your smooth talk. Just keep walking." The girls, pretending fright, said Strakotin, would hurry along the path, then burst into giggles. Soon everyone relaxed more and began to talk and laugh with each other, remembered Strakotin. Happy birthday, Marie. On the afternoon of June 27th, the little pair, along with Tatiana and Nicholas, carrying Alexei, went for their scheduled walk in the courtyard. Noted the Tsar in his diary, "Our dear Marie is 19 years old." One of the guards had also noted the Grand Duchess's birthday, and he had smuggled in a cake for her. Somehow, after his shift ended, he managed to pull Marie aside. The two slipped away. Where did they go? The kitchen? The hallway? One of the storerooms on the lower floor? The historical record doesn't indicate, but obviously the other guards, sympathetic to their comrade's feelings, looked the other way as he grabbed his chance to give Marie his gift. They were soon discovered. Little did the guards know that local Bolshevik authorities had chosen this day to inspect the house. Walking in on the couple, the officials were outraged. Obviously, security had completely collapsed. It was time for a clampdown. Authorities called in Yakov Yurovsky.